Bongino. The cooperation in Guthrie case has not been spectacular. Today, we're examining a deeply troubling missing person case that has exposed significant tensions between local and federal law enforcement and raised serious questions about investigative strategy, interagency cooperation, and the management of a case involving an 84-year-old woman at the center of what authorities are calling an unspeakable tragedy. The current state of the investigation. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has issued a sobering assessment. This case could take months, potentially even years, to solve. The sheriff has publicly described the investigation as exhausting. This is an unusual admission during an active case of this magnitude, and it has sparked immediate criticism from federal law enforcement veterans who question both the messaging and the investigative approach being employed. Former FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino has issued a sharp rebuke of this timeline, arguing that such statements are destructive to investigative morale. According to Bongino, when leadership suggests a case may remain unsolved for a year or longer, it undermines the dedication of investigators working around the clock to identify and apprehend the perpetrator. This is not merely a matter of tone. It speaks to the fundamental question of investigative momentum and public confidence. A critical misstep. The DNA evidence controversy. At the heart of the current controversy is a decision that has stunned federal investigators: the choice to send DNA samples to a private laboratory rather than utilizing FBI facilities. Bongino has characterized this decision as a disaster in terms of risk management and investigative efficiency. The issue is not simply one of preference. The FBI maintains strict protocols regarding DNA evidence. Federal authorities typically do not accept DNA samples that have been processed by private labs unless those facilities are accredited forensic laboratories. This means the DNA evidence in this case will likely need to be sent back to Arizona and resubmitted into CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, introducing yet another delay into an investigation where time is absolutely critical. Bongino's assessment is direct. This was an unnecessary complication. In his words, why introduce another variable when dealing with a missing 84-year-old woman who is the subject of an apparent tragedy? The question remains unanswered, and the delay continues. The FBI's technological edge. Why federal resources matter. One of the most significant revelations in this case involves the role of FBI technology in generating what may be the investigation's most important lead: doorbell camera video footage. According to sources close to the investigation, this critical piece of evidence would not exist without FBI involvement. The Bureau's technical capabilities, including signal detection, artificial intelligence-driven reverse lighting analysis, and the ability to work directly with technology companies like Google, enabled the recovery of video footage that had been previously inaccessible. This represents what investigators describe as the biggest break in the case. Yet despite this success, sources indicate that local authorities initially and deliberately attempted to limit FBI participation. The Pima County Sheriff's Office reportedly believed they could handle the investigation independently, despite lacking the specialized technical infrastructure that federal authorities possess. Bongino has expressed regret that certain FBI technologies, specifically mentioning blue light technology, were publicly disclosed during this investigation. This type of technical capability is typically kept confidential to preserve its operational effectiveness. However, once the information entered the public domain, that advantage was compromised. Specialization versus generalization, the federal advantage. It's important to understand that this is not a question of competence. Bongino is careful to emphasize that local homicide investigators, detectives who have conducted interviews in 20 or 30 murder cases, represent the best of the best in law enforcement. The FBI regularly works with task force officers from local departments, and these partnerships leverage the street-level expertise that cannot be replicated at the federal level. A detective in Miami with 30 years of experience investigating homicides brings irreplaceable knowledge. For interrogation and street-level investigative work, these officers are unmatched. However, the FBI operates under a different model: specialization of labor. While a local deputy or police officer might investigate a robbery one day, handle a missing person case the next, and work a completely different type of crime the day after, FBI specialists focus on singular disciplines. There are agents whose entire professional focus is CODIS processing and DNA analysis. Others work exclusively in the laboratory division. Technical specialists concentrate solely on their area of expertise. The FBI maintains digital video enhancement teams whose only function is to enhance digital video evidence. They are not generalists. This specialization means that when complex technical challenges arise, recovering deleted footage, analyzing cellular signals, processing forensic evidence under strict chain of custody protocols, federal resources offer capabilities that local agencies simply cannot match, regardless of the dedication or competence of their personnel. The question, then, is not one of superiority but of resource utilization. These are taxpayer-funded laboratory technologies and specialized capabilities. The investigative community is left asking, why would any agency deliberately avoid taking advantage of these resources when an elderly woman's fate hangs in the balance? The mysterious email contact, an unexplored lead? Adding another layer of complexity to this case, Harvey Levin of TMZ has reportedly received 4 separate emails from an individual claiming to know the whereabouts of the missing woman. According to Levin, this person initially demanded money in exchange for the information, stating that he would need to go into hiding after providing it. 4 emails, same account. Yet there are questions about whether this lead has been fully pursued. The technical question is straightforward. With 4 separate email communications from the same account, why hasn't the sender been identified and located? Bongino acknowledges that there are assumptions built into this scenario. The emailer could be someone seeking attention, playing to media outlets, or perhaps possessing unrelated information that has been misinterpreted. However, he emphasizes a fundamental principle. The FBI does not turn down information. While there are chain of custody considerations for physical evidence, investigative tips are accepted from any source. If the information leads to finding the woman or identifying the perpetrator, the origin of that tip is irrelevant. Nobody is interested in credit. The objective is resolution. The question remains whether this lead has been fully investigated, whether the emails have been properly analyzed, and whether federal resources have been applied to identifying the sender. The family clearance, an unusual public declaration. In what represents another notable development, the Pima County Sheriff's Office has issued a public statement explicitly clearing the missing woman's family members. The statement indicates that 3 family members, including all siblings and spouses, have been cleared as possible suspects. The sheriff emphasized that the family has been cooperative and gracious, characterizing them as victims in this case. The statement concluded with a sharp warning. Suggesting otherwise is not only wrong, but cruel. This is a significant public declaration during an active investigation. Bongino outlines several possible scenarios that could explain this unusual step. First, the family members may have airtight alibis. They were certainly looked at, that is, standard investigative protocol, and their alibis may be unimpeachable. Second, authorities may have developed an informant. Some individuals have been detained, vehicles have been examined, and raids have been conducted. There may be an informant, possibly someone previously arrested, who has provided information that definitively eliminates the family from suspicion. Third, and perhaps most significantly, investigators may have a specific subject in mind. They may have developed sufficient evidence to focus their attention elsewhere, making the family clearance a strategic communication. Was it wise to issue this public statement at this stage of the investigation? Bongino acknowledges the difficulty of that judgment. He's not running the investigation, and there may be variables and information that justify the decision. However, he characterizes it as a bold statement given the circumstances, one that suggests authorities possess significant information they have not yet disclosed publicly. The statistical reality. There is an uncomfortable statistical reality that hangs over this case. In approximately 90% of cases involving missing persons under suspicious circumstances, the perpetrator turns out to be someone related to or close to the individual. This is not speculation. It is investigative data accumulated over decades of law enforcement experience. This makes the sheriff's categorical clearance of family members even more notable. It suggests that whatever evidence or information investigators possess, it is substantial enough to overcome the statistical probability that would normally keep family members under scrutiny deep into an investigation. The broader questions. This case has become more than an investigation into a missing person. It has exposed fundamental questions about interagency cooperation, resource allocation, investigative strategy, and the tension between local autonomy and federal expertise. When an 84-year-old woman disappears under circumstances that authorities describe as tragic, when critical DNA evidence is routed through private labs instead of federal facilities, when breakthrough video evidence comes only through FBI technical intervention, when email leads of uncertain value remain inadequately explained, and when public statements are issued clearing family members despite statistical probabilities, all of these elements suggest an investigation that is, at minimum, complicated by factors beyond the crime itself. The cooperation between local and federal authorities has been described as less than spectacular. That is not a minor administrative detail. In a case of this severity, with a vulnerable elderly victim, cooperation is not optional, it is essential. Looking ahead. Tonight, an 84-year-old woman remains missing. DNA evidence is moving through a process that federal experts describe as unnecessarily complicated. Technical capabilities that could accelerate the investigation may or may not be fully deployed. Email communications from a potential source remain of uncertain investigative status, and the sheriff's office has indicated this case may not be resolved for months or years. These are not the hallmarks of an investigation operating at maximum efficiency. The question is no longer whether mistakes have been made. Experienced federal investigators have already answered that. The question is whether the investigative approach will be adjusted, whether full federal resources will be brought to bear, and whether the focus will return to the only objective that matters: finding this woman or identifying the perpetrator responsible for her disappearance. In cases like this, time is the enemy. Delays compound, evidence degrades, memories fade, leads grow cold. Every day that passes without resolution is another day that justice is delayed. The investigative community, the family, and the public deserve answers. And an 84-year-old woman deserves an investigation that utilizes every available resource, every technical capability, and every investigative tool at law enforcement's disposal. This is a developing investigation, and we will continue to monitor the facts as they emerge. But tonight, the facts we have paint a picture of an investigation hampered not by lack of evidence, but by decisions about how that evidence is being processed and which resources are being fully utilized. That is our analysis. We'll continue to follow this case,